Hi, my name is Christina, and I'm glad you're here to join me on video 3 in my sourdough series, where I take you on this journey to baking your very first loaf of sourdough bread. It's pretty exciting. In video 1, if you joined me from the beginning, I covered the fundamentals of sourdough, what it is, why we should eat it, and some of the tools that are needed in order to work with sourdough. In the second video, I covered how to make your starter and the proper care and feeding of it. And now here in video 3, I want to go over something to do with your starter. One thing that is necessary is to at some point discard some of it. And it seems really wasteful to discard some of that starter because you're just putting it right down the drain. But there are actually about 3 things that you can do with starter that you need to discard. One is, of course, you can throw it down the drain. The second is that once it's active and bubbly, and that means it's gone past that first 10 or 12 days of getting activated. When it's fully activated, you could actually give some of that away to a friend so that they can make their own starter and start working with sourdough. And then lastly is use it in some kind of a recipe, which is the most ideal, right? So what I want to do with you today is get us started working with sourdough and using some of that discard and putting it to good use. What we're going to do today is we're going to use this discard and make sourdough crackers. It's a really easy recipe to make, and it's kind of fun because you can make them in under an hour. And I love this because they're just so delicious when they come out of the oven. In fact, I've been known to burn my fingertips sometimes on the baking sheet, taking these things off the baking sheet before they fully cooled because they're so good when they're fresh out of the oven. And these crackers are best consumed within the first few days after baking. So let me show you what's needed for sourdough crackers. The first thing you're going to need for your sourdough crackers is, of course, some starter. And this is my tub where I keep my sourdough starter in. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just pull 1 cup out of this tub, and that's going to be my discard. And then I'm going to feed it to continue on with the feeding cycle that it requires on a daily basis when you're keeping it out of the refrigerator, of course. And so what I've done is I've put a cup into this bowl. Now, if you have one of these KitchenAid mixers, they are super handy for making bread. They are not necessary for what we are going to be doing today, and they aren't even going to be necessary, these mixers, if down the road when we make our first loaf of sourdough bread. But if you do happen to have one, it is super handy, and I do recommend using it if you have one. But if not, it is something to consider maybe investing in if you are planning to do any kind of serious cooking down the road. So anyway, first off, I've got my 1 cup of sourdough starter, and then I do like King Arthur flour, and I am using a white whole wheat flour from them today for these crackers. And so I'm going to be using 1 cup of this, and I'm going to be adding that to the starter. And then since this is really an herbed sourdough cracker, I'm going to be adding a variety of herbs to the tune of about 2 tablespoons altogether. And so I am going to just measure out real formally here, about 2 tablespoons altogether in a combination of herbs. And I've just started with probably about a teaspoon or so, a little bit over a teaspoon of thyme. And these are all going to be dried herbs. Okay, so it's a perfect way to use up some of your dried herbs because you don't want to be storing those for too long. And then I'm going to use some basil and some oregano. All right, so I probably could use just a little bit more of all of those. And I'm particularly partial to thyme, so I'm going to put a little bit more of the thyme in. So that's about 2 tablespoons all together. And then I'm going to need about ½ a teaspoon or so of salt. And I'm also going to need some butter, and I'm going to use 4 tablespoons of butter, and I'm going to just drop that in. And now my mixer is going to do all the work for me, and I'm going to just use this dough hook attachment and let it do its thing. And it might actually be helpful to break up that butter a little bit with a knife, just so you're machine doesn't have to work too hard. And it's softened butter, so it's been sitting out on the counter for several hours, so it should be pretty malleable. So after a few minutes of mixing this together, you're going to get a dough that is nice and well blended. And then what we're going to do is we're going to need to refrigerate this and just let it sit and rest for a little bit. So I've got a piece of plastic wrap, and I'm going to just take this and put it out onto the wrap, and then wrap that up and put it in the refrigerator for about 30 minutes. Okay, so while the dough is in the refrigerator resting for 30 minutes, turn on your oven to 350 and start to gather the rest of the things you're going to need to make your crackers. So what you're going to need is a baking sheet, first of all, to start with, and some parchment paper. Parchment paper is great for keeping things from sticking to the surface of the pan and also makes cleanup really easy. So that's ideal. Just take a sheet and kind of fit it to the pan. For rolling out your dough, you'll want a rolling pin, and I have this French rolling pin that I really like because it's long and doesn't have these ends that get in the way, but any kind of rolling pin will do. Now I have a long one that I'm going to start with, and then I'm going to finish off rolling out my dough with a small rolling pin like this, and this comes in handy because you can kind of get into the corners a little bit easier, and I really like this because then this end is also kind of cool for making cookies. So this might be something you want to look into getting. Once we roll out our dough, we're then going to paint the surface with some olive oil, and you'll need some kind of brush to apply that. And then once that is on, we're going to need something to cut our crackers with, and you can use one of two different tools. Maybe just a pizza cutter if you happen to have one of those, or this is a tool that's used to make ravioli, and it has kind of a cool little design on the side, and will just add that little extra something to your crackers. So if you have something like this, this is the time to get it out and use it. And lastly, after we've applied the oil onto the surface, you're going to want to sprinkle the top with some sort of salt. And what's great about this salt, and let me just show it to you if you can see it, this has a combination of edible flowers in it, which makes the surface really pretty. And then there's also herbs and some coarse salt in here. So something like this might be fun to invest in so that your crackers just have that extra little something, you know, on top that makes them really pretty. So this is nice. If you don't have that, you can certainly just use any kind of coarse salt, or in the absence of that, you can just use a regular salt. So after your dough has finished resting in the refrigerator for about a half an hour or even up to an hour or so, go ahead and get it out and divide it in two. And then what you're going to do is just sort of start folding it, or rather pressing it into sort of a flat disc just to get it started. And then lay it on your parchment paper and use your rolling pin to go ahead and start flattening it out. And if it sticks too much, you know, like it is here, you can always add a little bit of flour on top if you want, but just a little, not really a lot. In fact, I'm gonna just make do with it the way it is and probably switch over to my smaller rolling pin at this point. Just so much handier. And roll it out as best as you can into some sort of rectangular form. Now what you can do is you could use a cookie cutter and make round shapes. You could do that. But it's just a little bit more work, you know, because as you punch out holes, you're going to have this excess dough, and then you'll have to reform that and re-roll it out just like you do with cookies. And honestly, that's just going to add kind of to the time. I like things that go a little bit faster, so I'm going to just stick with kind of a rectangular shape. So get these as thin as you can. So after you've rolled the dough out into roughly a square or rectangular shape, you're going to take your brush and some olive oil and just go ahead and brush the surface of the dough with the oil. Use your ravioli tool and cut your crackers by just running this tool through the dough. Use some of your herb salt to sprinkle on top, or in lieu of herb salt, just regular coarse salt or fine salt, whatever you have, whatever you like. We'll slide this onto our cookie sheet and put that in the oven for about 25 minutes. So why bother making crackers? I mean, you can buy there's a million of them on the market, but you know what? These are really, really, really delicious. I can't find anything that tastes quite like them in the supermarket, and plus a lot of the ones in the supermarket do have some questionable ingredients in them. So I really just like making my own because it's a great use of this discard that I need to do something with. They make a great hostess gift. You can put them into a little decorative bag and give them to your hostess when you're invited somewhere for dinner. Makes a really thoughtful gift. You know, it's a gift from your kitchen, and you know, who does that anymore, right? I mean, I think that is just such a nice touch when you go somewhere to bring some crackers, maybe some cheese with you, and you guys can have hors d'oeuvres before you're waiting for dinner to start. Or of course, if you're inviting people to come to your house for dinner, it makes a great little appetizer. Give them a glass of wine as they arrive, and have some of these crackers and cheese out for them. Now, speaking of the cheese, these, since they're herb crackers, they are delicious with Boursin cheese. And that is a fresh cheese, a creamy cheese, a spreadable cheese that has herbs in it already. So with these herb crackers, with an herb salt on top and an herb cheese on top, they are just an explosion of flavor and really, really delicious. So crackers aren't the only thing that you can use your sourdough discard for. There are a number of other recipes that you can check out. I will put them in the description below this video, and click on those links, and that'll give you some additional ideas for things to use your discard for. Things like pizza dough, or cookies, or pancakes, or noodles, which is something I've always wanted to try making. So check out the link below for more ideas. So I hope you enjoyed this video and had a good taste of what you can make with sourdough starter discard rather than throwing it away. And if you like this video, please give it the old thumbs up down below and click on the subscribe button so that you can subscribe to the channel and be notified when future videos are uploaded. And of course, share this video with a friend if you so choose. But do make these crackers, especially for like an upcoming holiday. I think they would be really special to make. People will be wowed by the fact that you made your own crackers, and why not? They're super delicious. Thanks for watching.